So it turns out it's really common for universities to invest in fossil fuels, and there are a number of reasons for that. Something that combats that is the divestment movement. Divestment is when a shareholder in a company sells off their investments. They could be divesting from one company or a whole industry. But it's not just about money. It could also be about making a statement. So, investments. I'm not an accountant, as you can probably tell from my outfit. So I spoke with Milan Ilnitsky. Milan is a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto who's doing his dissertation on divestment in Canadian universities. Here's what he told me. First, there's the fact that universities hire financial advisors to tell them what to invest in. Their investments aren't necessarily about what the university supports as an institution. Their job is about finding what will get the greatest rate of return. There's another reason, though, that stems from the people who are governing those financial bodies. Often there are people with personal ties to the fossil fuel industry sitting on the board of directors. They may have had previous relations with the industry, or they could be sitting on the board for a fossil fuel corporation at the same time. They could also be sitting on the board of an institution that has strong ties to the industry, like a bank. For example, RBC and TD are some of the biggest investors of the fossil fuel industry. Those folks are concerned with their financial relationships. But if we're gonna get deep and we're gonna get real, let's talk about Canada's identity. No, not the multicultural one or like the hockey one, but our economic role in the world. Harold Innis's staple theory talks about how Canada's natural resources are a determining factor in our politics. Canada's so dependent on its role as a resource extractor that it's integral to who we are as a country economically. According to this theory, not extracting resources could be seen as unpatriotic. Divesting would be a big political statement. Universities might not want to engage in that because they're worried about their public image. Corporations and alumni could pull their donations, and that's where the big bugs are at. Still, some universities in Canada have divested. Let's look at the 5 biggest schools across Canada by population size. We've got the University of British Columbia, the University of Alberta, University of Toronto, York University, and l'Université de Montréal. So of these 5 schools, only one has committed to fully divest, and that's UBC. Back in December, UBC committed to partially divest and to explore the option of full divestment. This came after years of advocacy from students and faculty, including the group UBC 350. But the university didn't commit to fully divest until this January. One activist group, Extinction Rebellion, told the Board of Governors that if they didn't commit to fully divest by the end of 2019, they would go on a hunger strike. The university said they needed more time, so on January 6th, 8 people started a hunger strike that went on for 96 hours. Only then did the university commit to fully divest as soon as possible. I spoke with one of the students who went on strike, Rory Mills. He talked to me about why he was willing to experience the physical and mental discomfort of not eating for almost 100 hours.
So the whole reason that we decided to do a hunger strike for the divestment campaign was that it set a precedent, and that the precedent had been set by other university students across North America and Britain as well, for hunger striking for divestment. And I think the speed and the clarity by which UBC was able to act once they saw their students going through something like what we did, really kind of puts it into perspective how quickly things can change. And I think a lot of students and a lot of universities are already considering it. So we're excited to see where the momentum of this movement takes it.
So of the other schools, only York and U of T have had campaigns, but York's is no longer active. They campaigned for divestment from fossil fuels and weapon manufacturing for years with no success. Folks at U of T have been calling for divestment from fossil fuels since 2015. At the time, the president, Merrick Gertler, put together a committee to consider the petition, the President's Ad Hoc Committee. That committee recommended the university partially divest, but Gertler decided to take a different route. He responded in 2016 by releasing a 45-page report about why the university would not divest and what alternative green approaches they could take instead. Since then, U of T has changed their investment portfolio. This February, they committed to reducing the emissions of their investments by at least 40% by 2030. But also since then, there's been a lot more urgency around climate change and more information on how institutions should respond. Matt Hoffman was on the committee that recommended partial divestment. He's a professor in political science at U of T. His research focuses on global climate change and global environmental politics and governance.
Since then, the case for divestment has gotten stronger and stronger. In fact, I would argue now for more of a full divestment than I would this more nuanced divestment. I think in the last couple of years, the social injury around climate change, the sort of catastrophic impacts have become more and more clear. I think that the financial risks of being heavily invested in fossil energy are also more and more clear. And so on both the fiduciary responsibility side and the social injury side, the case for moving out of fossil energy in investments has become stronger and stronger. University of Toronto's investments are not the make it or break it financially for that industry, but I think it could have helped develop a national conversation that has been ongoing, but I think is not going as quickly as it needs to.
A lot of pro-divestment folks make the connection that the fossil fuel industry has not only with climate change, but also with colonialism and imperialism. They see the divestment movement as both a statement and a tactic to resist these things. I spoke with a few people in a group that campaigns for divestment at U of T. Carmen Besniker is an organizer with LEAP.
It's hard to link how an invasion of Wet'suwet'en territory in BC is connected to Canadian taxpayers subsidizing fossil fuel corporations, is connected to Canadian mining corporations abroad, committing obscene human rights abuses. But we aim as a movement to sort of make these connections in the minds of the student body and also of the wider public, and to show them that the power is in our hands as voters, as taxpayers, and as students. And we don't need to be accepting it. We don't need to be allowing the go-ahead to be given without challenging financial and social capital and how it gives power in a democracy.
So what does all of this back and forth between the university and the advocates mean? Well, when 350 called for divestment, they had three main goals: divest, delegitimize fossil fuels, and uplift student activists. So a long process towards divestment isn't a total loss for advocates. Many will admit that their university's investments only hold so much power. Divestment is obviously about selling stocks, but it's also about the discourse around climate change. A big part of what advocates want is to move the conversation from universities to the political sphere. That way, they might start to see structural changes. Even though the divestment movement in Canadian universities has been much less popular than in the US or the UK, global attitudes seem to be changing. And divestment is just one strategy that people are using to call for climate action. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something from this video. And if you did, make sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe to stay tuned for more videos.